Summarize the chaos. A beach holiday turns brutal when an entitled mother demands a stolen spot, only to end up rolling in broken glass and biohazard sludge. Tease the revenge and end with a dramatic line like, "When you grow up with nothing but spite and a plastic shovel, you basically a landmine with pigtails." This story takes place a very long time ago, back when I was about 9 or 10. Still young enough to get into trouble, but old enough to fully commit to the art of revenge. It was one of those long, sticky summers where my family, which included my mom, my grandma, and my aunt, packed up and headed to Ukraine for our yearly pilgrimage to the Black Sea. No dads. No grandpas, no testosterone. Just us girls and enough emotional damage to fund a Netflix miniseries. But we didn't care. It was heaven on a budget, and to us that made it even better. This was Ukraine. The rules were simple. Don't be stupid, don't mess with anyone tougher than you, and bring your own disinfectant. The chaos, the grit, the way my mom and aunt would bicker 1 second and then team up like seasoned con artists the next. My aunt was about 10 years older than me, more like an older sister than a proper adult. Together, we were the resident agents of pettiness. When there was injustice, we didn't call for help. We'd scored the jackpot prime real estate right between the water and the main entrance with a huge public-use umbrella shading our spot like a VIP lounge for tired Slavic women and one hyper 9-year-old with a plastic shovel. No broken bottles, no soggy cigarette butts, just sand, sea, and smug satisfaction. Who were already throwing seaweed at each other and screaming like banshees. And then she locked eyes on us. We became the help. And by help, I mean coordinated acts of psychological warfare with sand and broken glass. My mom actually laughed out loud, thinking it was a joke. You could scream, fight, claim territory like a wild animal, and no one would blink twice. If you were lucky, someone might hand you a beer. That particular summer would turn into one of our most unforgettable operations. All sparked by a screaming hippo of a woman and her trio of hell-raising kids who picked the wrong Slavic girls to mess with. Then, and I kid you not, she started kicking our towels and bags. "And now your fat asses are taking up our spot." She was one vowel away from starting an international incident. "My kids are burning their feet because of you cows." She snorted, rolled her eyes, and hit her back with the classic Slavic comeback. My grandma rarely traveled with us, mostly because she and Grandpa owned a big property with animals that needed tending. Grandpa would always stay behind, loyal to the goats, I guess. As for my dad, don't even ask. Let's just say the man could win awards for being a deadbeat. That S when one of the hellspawn, let's say EK2, stomped over and kicked it down like he was reenacting a scene from God of War. Then he tried to bend my shovel like it owed him money. And on the sand by 8. Why? Because by 11 a.m., the beach turned into a human oven. It would get so hot you could practically fry eggs on your forehead. And that's before the crowds rolled in. Our mission was always the same. Get there early, snag the least trash-infested spot. Unless someone's on fire or actively bleeding out, nobody's lifting a finger. My mom? Oh, she'd had enough. She stepped forward and gave M the stare of death. Thick thighs save lives, and we're proud of it, but this woman? She made us look like yoga instructors. She was built like a brick sauna and carried herself like she owned the entire coastline. Round 2. I scooped a handful of wet sand and jabbed it right into ET1's eye. His brothers tried to wrestle me, but I spat in one's face and kicked the other in the knee. Chaos erupted, screaming kids, flailing limbs, and one very defeated hippo of a mother trying to gather her demon spawn. Let's call her M, entitled mother. And with her came 3 equally chaotic little goblins, all boys, ranging from about 6 to maybe 10 years old. Let's call them EK1, EK2, and EK3 entitled kids, aka the gremlins. And dip before the sun turned us into roast pigs. Then I whacked him, not once, not twice, but full-on shovel combat mode. I was swinging like a kid possessed. So every summer it was the estrogen squad rolling deep to the seaside, ready to fight sand, sun, and stupidity head-on. Now if you've never vacationed at the Black Sea in Ukraine, let me set the scene. It's both stunning and savage. The water? Gorgeous. The beaches? A war zone. You're not lying on soft, manicured white sands with coconut water in hand. Nah, You're navigating landmines of broken bottles, cigarette butts, and the occasional syringe, like a beach-themed episode of Survivor Slavic Edition. You don't go barefoot unless you're either brave, drunk, or looking to collect tetanus for free. Our daily beach ritual was like clockwork. Up by 7 a.m., towels packed, feet protected, after beach hours, we'd hit the little seaside town nearby, filled with cheap arcades, knockoff Barbie dolls, churros that tasted like fried hope, and enough weird rides to make you question safety regulations. There were no lifeguards, no beach patrol, no Karen hotlines. And that's what made these trips so special. The beach was our battlefield. And every summer we came ready. Little did I know. Now picture this. We're chilling. It's about 10 a.m. and the beach is filling up fast. Enter the human hippo. Now before anyone clutches pearls, yes, we're big girls in my family. EM stomped across the sand like Godzilla, dragging a half-deflated floaty and yelling at her kids. With the rage of someone who just found out her favorite vending machine was out of snacks, she marched over and bellowed, "Em, you're in our spot." The four of us blinked in sync, like owls. "Mom, are you having a heat stroke or are you being serious right now?" "Wrong move." Em gasped like she'd been slapped with a wet fish. "Em, we've been sitting here for the past 3 days." Now, in English that sounds mildly aggressive. But the tone, the volume, and the audacity. Cue my aunt, MS, who was never one to let an insult slide. MS, nok to yuj karovas dies tak ito ni mai. Mic drop. While the adults were trading verbal haymakers, I was busy constructing a mighty sandcastle, complete with a moat, a stick flag, and dreams of medieval glory. Big mistake. I jumped up like a caffeinated squirrel, shoved him back, and snatched my shovel from his greasy little fingers. "Me, touch my stuff again and I'll bury you in the sand head first."
He started crying, but I didn't care. My shovel was sacred.
Screamed like she was being murdered. Did you see that? She hit my child. Cue collective beach apathy. This is Ukraine, baby. Meanwhile, my grandma stood up, muttering a prayer, probably asking God to keep her from jumping in and finishing what I started. "Mom, pick up your fat Gioipa and take it somewhere else before we collectively cripple you." Em tried to slap her. Bad move. Before anyone could blink, I had a new mission. Shovel to face warfare. Em, the second you bitches leave, this spot is mine. Yeah, noted. Filed. Highlighted in red. We didn't need to yell back. The gears in my aunt's brain were already turning. I could see the petty forming behind her sunglasses. And let me tell you, that wasn't the last M would hear from us. Because if there's one thing you never do in Eastern Europe, it's challenge a 9-year-old with a shovel and a grudge. So there we were, towels kicked, belongings stomped on, dignity temporarily hijacked by a woman who looked like she snacked on drywall for breakfast, and her feral trio of beach gremlins. Still at it. One was sobbing about sand in his eye, another was trying to eat seaweed, and the last one was kicking at the umbrella pole like it had personally insulted his Roblox account. And me? I was locked in, shovel in hand. 9 years old, but running on adrenaline and righteous rage. This wasn't just about sand toys anymore. This was principle, territory, honor. Em was now full tilt, screaming at the top of her lungs, calling us every insult in her vocabulary, switching between Russian and Ukrainian like she was auditioning for a telenovela about beach justice. I'm pretty sure she invented some new swear words on the spot. Em, these monsters attacked my children. Someone call the police. Ma'am, this is Ukraine. There are no beach police. The only badge out here is your sunburn, and the only law is don't get wrecked. He broke my sandcastle. He tried to bend my tools. My shovel? That's sacred ground. My inner voice was screaming, defend the fort. One of her boys, EK2, was still crying from the shovel strike, and I didn't care. Wet, clumpy, full of tiny shell bits. He screamed like I'd cursed at his ancestors. He came at me again, full of tears and fury, trying to push me. Again, bad move. My mom didn't flinch. She leaned in, stared her down, and dropped one of the most iconic Ukrainian mom threats I've ever heard. I didn't hesitate. She threatened to take our spot the second we packed up. Called us names. said our kids were monsters. Meanwhile, the three EKs were sniveling messes, rubbing their eyes, covered in wet sand, snot, and what looked like sea slug slime, and the crowd. Oh, they were watching all right. They didn't step in. No one tried to stop it. But they watched. Like they'd paid for front row seats to some street-level WA match. Spit. Direct to the face. Kick. Right in the shin. Oh, we knew what was coming next. Then, with all the strength in my tiny arms, I jabbed a scoop of sand straight into Aquan's eye. That special look that meant, don't say anything. But you know what time it is. Meanwhile, Em lunged forward, as if she was going to slap my mom. Mom, let her and her goblins think they had us cornered. But every villain forgets one crucial rule. Never threaten people with nothing to lose and too much free time. Try it, and you'll be drinking borscht through a straw for the next 6 months. Couldn't even hold in her laugh. Grandma was frozen, half horrified, half trying not to bless the ground with holy water. Random guy nearby. She started it. Let them finish. Legend. Now Em started shrieking about how we were mentally unstable psychopaths, which okay, fair, but still rude. You bitches are leaving eventually, and when you do, this spot is mine. She even planted her gross, sandy flip-flops right at the edge of our towel, like she was claiming it with her body odor. And we said nothing. Because we knew. Grandma, bless her old-school soul, tried to bring peace. Grandma, maybe we just move and find another spot, Mom, and let her think she won? Over my dead Geoipa, Ness was already looking at me with the face. I nodded. My shovel glistened in the sun like Excalibur. Revenge was brewing, not loud, not immediate. But methodical, surgical, delicious. We let Em rage, let her burn her energy. We weren't going to scream back anymore. We were going to wait. And then we were going to bury her, literally, not with fists, not with words. With glass, trash, and cigarette butts. But that part? That was coming next. We knew better than to retaliate right away. In a place like this, where the sun saps your patience and the sand hides 1,000 sins, you don't to win by shouting louder. You win by thinking meaner, and me and my Aunt MS, we were professionals. This wasn't our first beach brawl, not even close. Growing up without full-time cable or the internet, you learn to make your own fun. We didn't yell, we just exchanged a glance. And that fun often involves turning life into a live-action count of Monte Cristo, one petty revenge at a time. So when Em spat out her final threat, the second you bitches leave, this spot is mine. We didn't argue. That left me and S alone on the beach, surrounded by our stuff and the looming shadow of our sweaty nemesis just yards away. Still pacing like a predator waiting for its prey to leave. It was on. My mom and grandma, still mildly steaming from the whole incident, decided to take one last dip in the sea to cool off before we packed up. Around us the beach was already showing its afternoon decay, cigarette butts, beer bottle shards glinting in the sun. I even found an abandoned sardine tin, half buried with crusted juice still in it, score. A rogue Band-Aid here and there. And the usual mystery gunk that only appears in places without sanitation laws. Perfect. You thinking what I'm thinking? Me, Operation Sandstorm. She told me to grab my little beach tools, the shovel, the bucket, and my prized spatula. Not for castle building. This time, we were going treasure hunting, trash treasure. To everyone else, it looked like we were just kids building an elaborate sandcastle. And we kinda were. We sprinkled the cigarette butts around the center of the space, right where Em was most likely to plant her butt. I fanned seaweed over the top of one spot to camouflage some jagged bottlenecks. Only this castle had a moat of misery and towers made of trash. Worse. She thought we were giving up. And that's when she laid it out. Not enough to cause lasting damage, but enough to make sitting there a guaranteed trip to the pain train. And just as we were walking toward the exit path, Em deliberately slowed down and turned her head, just in time for Em to pounce. And the timing was perfect. The beach was still crowded, the heat was unforgiving, and the lifeguards were probably 3 kilometers away doing absolutely nothing. I zipped off like a kid on a scavenger hunt from hell. Using my spatula and claw grabber, I started scooping up every gross, dangerous, sharp, or smelly thing I could find, all without touching anything directly. Meanwhile, MS stayed behind and started packing up our stuff with one eye on M, who was now sitting on a cooler, fanning herself, and whispering to her gremlins like she was prepping for battle. She thought wrong. I returned to our base with a full bucket of nightmare fuel. Glass shards, cigarette ends, bits of broken plastic, sharp shells, and enough trash to make a raccoon rethink its life choices. M had sat directly on one of the glass patches, her thigh catching the edge, her towel ripping under her weight, and every ounce of that arrogance now sobbing in blood, sweat, and Marlboro ash. MS looked at the bucket, nodded, and whispered. M was rolling in sand, trash, and whatever bacteria was colonizing in the filth we left behind. Ens, let's go to work. The next 10 minutes were pure tactical genius. The sun is an unrelenting tyrant, blazing at 35 degrees Celsius, like it's trying to burn a hole through the ozone just above this exact beach. The sand? Lava? The breeze? Non-existent. The only relief was under that big public umbrella, which, thanks to our early efforts and her big mouth, was now a glass and trash minefield dressed up like a 5-star beach resort. We kept our backs turned to M so she couldn't see what we were doing. MS carefully scooped handfuls of glass and buried them under thin layers of sand, sharp side up. To an outsider, it was just 2 girls building in the sand. But to us, it was performance art. We buried it strategically. Her spawn squealed around her like greased piglets, still wiping sand from their noses and tears from their eyes after our earlier play date. By the time Mom and Grandma returned from their swim, we were already done packing. MS grabbed my hand and whispered,
MS, go grab them, stall them a bit, take the long way back.
We did exactly that. Like a sweaty goblin queen claiming her throne, and practically shoved MS aside and hurled her towel onto the spot without checking a single grain of sand. And have a lovely rest of your day. We didn't even look back. We didn't need to. Because 2 steps later it started. A scream, sharp and sudden, followed by a flurry of shrieks from her spawn. M. Agay. H. What the hell? The sound was delicious. Like a violin screech made of karma and suffering. One of the kids stepped on something sharp and let out a wail that echoed across the beach. Another tripped and landed on the cigarette-strewn pile. And the best part? People looked, sure, but no one helped. Because on this beach, you don't get sympathy for starting drama. You get tetanus. Now let's set the mood. It's high noon. And there she was, the human hippo, eyes locked on the spot like she was claiming the throne in Game of Thrones, Eastern Bloc edition. As we walked off casually, me, full body flop. Mom and Grandma, she bulldozed in. Zero hesitation, no looking down. Choked gasp. Then a shriek that sent every pigeon within a mile radius flying. You ever hear someone sit directly onto jagged glass? Just a proud thud shredded by the sharp edges buried just beneath the sand. Finally. That moment where she realized this wasn't just a bad seat, this was intentional. About time these bitches left. The sound was immediate. It's not a clean scream. It's messy. Trying to get up. She planted her hand onto another shard and sliced her palm open. Now she was howling, flailing, rolling like a broken seal. Gurgled, real blood, trickling down her thigh where a chunk of brown glass had jabbed straight into her skin. Like her soul got lacerated along with her backside. The towel tore under her. The sandcastle destroyer rushed over to help his mom and immediately stepped onto a sharp shell glass combo. You could see the shift in her eyes, that flicker from arrogance to panic. She was trapped in a bear trap made of her own karma. She tried to jerk up, too late. What the F, what is this? As she thrashed and rolled, followed by a scream that cut through the air like a siren. Blood, but the pain party wasn't over. Seaweed and cigarette sand that stuck to his bleeding ankle like leeches at a spa. You could hear it, a crunch, EK1. Mama. It was justice. It was a full-blown horror movie, beach edition. They knew, they saw. They remembered her screaming insults earlier. lit a cigarette, yelling at the kids to stop crying. Mom sat there rubbing her temples like she was doing the math on how many years of therapy I'd need. Trying to bandage herself with the remains of a ripped towel that now looked like a bloody mop. Her knee was scraped raw, silent. Her thigh bleeding down her calf and her palm. Split open like a tomato, and went right back to sunbathing. Seaweed clung to her like cursed jewelry. Eyes wild, but only after a bribe, a cigarette, and maybe a nap. Looking for someone to help. Strips of it wrapped around her arm, slapping against her wound. Not really. Sticking to the sweat on her back. Her kids were smeared in blood. God truly protected us. Sand, ash, and whatever mysterious slime pooled in that patch of the beach. Seaweed and cigarette butts like a human dumpster sushi roll. They saw the kids throwing sand, breaking toys, demanding spots like it was their birthright. We have a saying, Sam nachosia, Sam Isaacansave. And a cow being exorcised, Grandma turned to us like she was leading a prayer group at a crime scene. And now, with blood mixing into the trash-riddled sand like some grotesque cocktail, Grandma crossed herself and whispered, "Grandma, all they did was watch."
He went down face first, dragging his leg over the glass pit and rolling into a patch of damp.
MS. EK2 slipped on the now bloody towel and landed right on the butts pile. Used filters. Soggy and blackened, smearing across his shirt and legs like a nicotine nightmare. EK3 tried to flee, tripped over the corner of the umbrella pole, and landed directly onto the sardine can I'd tossed in for flavor. Upbringing. We packed up faster than a bootleg fireworks stand before a police raid. Metal met flesh. Tears met snot.
Ew.
You could hear the kids sniffling, someone dry heaving, and the unmistakable crunch of sand being kicked over broken glass. And about 6 kilos of glass, cigarette ends, and a rusted sardine tin. Ents ordered us lemonades. The cafe's old TV played a bootleg copy of some soap opera where everyone was screaming, a solid match for the vibe of the beach not 300 meters away. Grandma just kept muttering about divine protection, repeating it like a mantra, no sense of urgency, no rushing. Just a casual stroll in the sweltering heat. The horror was ongoing. The trash and seaweed we'd buried had come alive, clinging to her wounds, her towel, her soul. Ordered cold drinks, and that's before we even talk about the bribes. You're paying for time, attention, and stitches, with cash in hand and a polite tone. We estimated a minimum of €500 just to get proper attention, maybe more. And knowing her kind. She probably didn't teave and pack a first aid kit, just attitude and a mountain of entitlement. And now, with help finally visible, we realize something truly magical. And it's not just waiting in line. It's waiting in agony, under a punishing sun, hoping someone with a diploma eventually bothers to show up. Paramedics, they'll help. And watched from a distance as the horror unfolded. About an hour later, after I had been marinating in pain, sweat, Mom was still pretending she didn't raise a pair of petty vigilantes. Bacteria and cigarette ash for Don T start battles not ready to lose, especially not with kids raised on spite, sarcasm, and Soviet-era survival instincts. One moment you're yelling about a towel, the next you're rolling in glass shards. Far. 2. And if you want to hear more petty schemes from the Slavic sisterhood, hit that bell, comrade. Long, we finally saw a medic wandering down the path with the speed of a tortoise on vacation. That was psychotic. Help! Help! I'm bleeding! Probably risking infection, heat exhaustion, and whatever other flavor of misery was floating in that trash heap. And in Ukraine. Unless you're dying, help takes forever. Oh, and you have to pay bribes, always, but no one moved. Not a soul. Too late. It wasn't apathy, the regulars on this beach? One older lady nearby just shook her head and muttered, Vospitanai. Another guy laughed. Em was shrieking about infection. As she stumbled to her feet, she knew. I knew. Even Mom knew. Though she tried to keep a straight face as she yanked me away from the she'd been rolling in trash for over an hour. Bleeding into sand, baking like a human casserole. Seen, muttering under her breath, she turned in a circle, but the beach? Because in Ukraine, somewhere behind us, Grandma, praise the Lord we didn't sit on that filth. Yes, and I just looked at each other and grinned. Mom, you're not getting dessert today, but she wasn't mad. We found a nearby cafe, too little. EM had spent over an hour rolling in filth. We figured her little glass spa day probably cost her €500 minimum, just to get attention, and that is not including tetanus shots or trauma therapy. And the best part? There were no cameras. No witnesses willing to talk, no evidence, no fingerprints. Just a trashed towel, 3 sobbing kids, and a woman whose arrogance literally got her cut down to size. As we sipped our drinks and watched the mayhem fade into the background, Ence leaned over and whispered, "Well, that was satisfying. And honestly, it really was." The second M hit that high note of agony, somewhere between a banshee-esque wail grandma. "Oh Lord, thank you for sparing us. We could have been the ones sitting on that filth." Meanwhile, my mom was already in damage control mode. She grabbed my arm, gave it the U single quotes re dash so dash grounded, yank, and hissed under her breath, "Mom, are you insane? You could have killed someone with that." But MS, cool as ever, brushing invisible sand off her legs, just stepped in. "MS, it was me. I told her what to do. It's my fault." And honestly, no one even questioned it. Between the two of us, she had the brains. I had the shovel. The logic checked out. Grandma still looked like she was auditioning for sainthood, pretending we had nothing to do with it, while simultaneously speed-walking us away from the scene like she was afraid God might notice. As we shuffled off the beach, M was still howling in the background. We found a small seaside cafe not far away, one of those places that sold lukewarm Coke and mystery meat cutlets, but Blessley had shade. "Grandma, it was God's grace, that's all. Pure grace." "Sure, Grandma, grace." We sipped our drinks in silence for a while. And then finally, like some lazy prophecy fulfilled, we saw them, paramedics. 2 guys in faded red uniforms, dragging a dusty medical kit, walking toward the beach like they'd just woken up from a nap. This is Ukraine. If you not literally dying, or if you don't have the cash to make them care, you waiting. We figured it had to be for M, this revenge. It was expensive. She'd need antiseptics, stitches, likely antibiotics for whatever bacterial cocktail she got from the sand sludge glass combo. See, medical care in these holiday zones doesn't come from charity. So not only did she lose the spot, get publicly humiliated, and physically shredded, she had to pay for it. Out of pocket. With no one helping, no one filming, no proof, no karma police. Just one painful, trash-covered, infected vacation to remember for the rest of her life. As we sat back and watched the medics finally disappear over the dunes, Enz leaned back, hands behind her head, and whispered, "MS, she won't be back tomorrow." Me, she might never sit again. We toasted our lemonades. Grandma was still praying. But deep down, we all knew this wasn't just beach revenge. This was generational vengeance, and it tasted so good. So what's the lesson here? Simple. Revenge doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes buried beneath the sand with your name on it. Like and subscribe if you're here for justice with a side of spite.